Hi everyone and welcome to your daily tarot reading. Now today's cards reflect some very unusual vibes that we are experiencing, but then again, this is something to be expected because there are two very powerful quincunxes, minor astrological aspects, which create exactly awkwardness, randomness, shocks, surprises. And since this energy is highly influential in the present moment, I think this is affecting us one way or another, where either our communications, our gestures, everything that we try to express is misinterpreted or is misfiring or is taken in a way which we didn't intend it. But of course, this might not be anything negative in itself, just that it can confuse us and it can, make us think that much more. And that is exactly why that Ace of Swords is reversed, because this card should be very positive, because it can represent epiphanies, insights, communication, very powerful information, or the fertility, the creativeness of your own mind coming to the surface and helping you solve all your situations. But since it is reversed, what it means basically is that the truth is out there, definitely, just that it might not be very helpful in the present moment, because everything that is out there is so subjective regardless how we look at it. And this is where we almost feel like we live in a highly subjective and illusionary reality where, usually it's like, our inner worlds and our dreams and wishes and everything that we dream about should be the subjective reality. And, we stand from a place of knowing, because we know that we cannot 1,000,000% rely on our fantasies, so to speak. But when the situation gets to the exact opposite, where our inner, fantasies or illusions or whatever are more true, are more authentic than everything that is out there, well, that is a very, unusual, very surprising, very unsettling situation. Because, usually we were taught all our waking lives that, whenever we get lost, whenever we get a little bit confused and stuff like that, all we need to do is ground ourselves in physical reality, look at external reality, how it unfolds, what it appears to be like, and that can hold answers, etc. But in the present moment, that is so very untrue, because external reality is just as subjective as our own, because what it is basically the subjective impression of the world leaders or the politician or the scientists, where even they admit that they don't hold the ultimate truth and they are just going by what appears to be right for them personally. So everything is so very subjective that we cannot find anything to ground ourselves into, not our inner truth, because that is subjective by nature and we know that 1,000,000%. But when the outer reality and everything that should hold answers outside of our beings, the collective, science, the laws of nature, physical reality, when that is also equally, if not more, as subjective and than whatever we perceive, then we are in a lot of trouble. Because mentally, intellectually, our intellect, they have nowhere to go, nowhere to hide, no refuge. Like it or not, we can either shut everything down and build a bubble of ignorance around ourselves. But if we choose not to do this, then information is going to reach us from every possible source. And it is not very helpful at the moment, because all of us are seeking the truth one way or another, but this is where we cannot find it anywhere. And basically the card which follows is the Four of Cups, the card of very profound contemplation, asking for divine guidance, thinking everything through, feeling everything through, uniting the past, present, and future, trying to make sense of it. You know, in most tarot decks, this card is actually quite positive, but in this tarot deck, this card is very negative because the way the author interprets it, this card, is that by seeking answers, by contemplating, by just being in a permanent state of meditation, well, it might ground our energies, it might, distract our mind and even our emotions, but it separates us from living life. And while all this time, while we contemplate, that is exactly the hand of the divine offering that cup to the person underneath the tree, the contemplating person, because opportunities, chances, solutions, even if they are not very obvious, even if they're not logical, might be just in our sphere of awareness, but if we're blind to it, we're definitely going to be missing it out. And what that opportunity is, what that cup is which the divine hand holds, is nothing more than the Ace of Cups, really, the Holy Grail, the power of the emotions, the purity of emotions. And that tells us that does it really matter all that much if we understand everything, if we know everything, if we stand from a place of truth? Because, for example, a baby or a very small child doesn't know anything, and yet it also holds a truth of its own, and it is more pure, more divine than us adults. The emotional power of a child, of a very small and inexperienced child, is that much more significant than that of a highly educated philosopher or scientist or even a spiritualist who has almost, achieved enlightenment. And this is basically the contradiction. Knowledge is power, but is it really a gateway to the divine? Because, if an innocent, inexperienced child which doesn't know absolutely anything, it doesn't know how the world works, it doesn't know science, it doesn't even know how to read or write, and it still holds a divine innocence, it still holds a truth of its own, it still holds so very much power, and it definitely holds the Ace of Cups, because the emotional state of that child is totally irresistible to its parents and to most adults that would surround it. So that is the power and the influence of innocence. And what this Four of Cups is trying to tell us, that maybe it is perfectly okay to be lost, it is perfectly okay not to know the truth, it is perfectly okay and healthy to be detached in the present moment, because that makes us that much more innocent. That makes us that much more powerful emotionally, and every time when we tune into a vibe of innocence, we become that much closer. We develop a that stronger relationship to the divine, to the source within. And ultimately, the source within is connected to nature. So, do we actually need all that knowledge? That is definitely has been taken away from us in the present moment. Where, a flock of birds don't need any knowledge whatsoever to fly from one continent to the other, whereas we human beings, without knowledge, we wouldn't be flying absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. But we are still connected to nature, and our instincts, our primal selves, are still an open gateway to, the influence of nature, to the wisdom, knowledge, and information of nature. We don't need to have solutions to everything, because if we are an active part of nature, if we don't ignore that part of ourselves, which is basically just an animal, just an element connected to the circle and cycle of nature, then we can also tap into that instinctual, primal knowledge and intelligence which can guide us. If birds can do it, if bees can do it, if a dog can find its home even if it's lost anywhere, well then so can we, but we will need to switch off the analytical power and analytical basically instinct of our minds which has been deeply programmed and rooted into us through our education, and it's nothing bad and negative because we do need that to survive in the human world. But when that is no longer an option, and there are times and there are karmic cycles in life, in the history of humankind, when knowledge was just not an option, when our ancestors had to survive with total ignorance, basing their decisions just on their instincts and intuition, and they still survived, and they still accomplished great deeds, and their worlds didn't end, they were just fine, then we also have that power, we also have that opportunity, and if anything, the universe and the karmic forces are just enlivening our instincts, Chiron in Aries. We are being healed instinctually to trust our gut feelings, to trust our intuition, to be able to exist even in not knowledge, if that is a valid word, sorry. As long as we are not ignorant to the divine and how it manifests in nature with all her signs, then we already are in a place of knowledge where we can just interpret it in our own unique and individual ways, and it is absolutely fine. Now, another aspect of this energy, which this Four of Cups speaks about, well, we are living a kind of moment when our collective consciousness has been one way or another switched off, where the big collective info source, which would determine what physical reality should be and how it should function, well, all of a sudden that was switched off. So it's basically like living in a spiritual anarchy, which is absolutely fine. It shouldn't really frighten us. It shouldn't really stop us from existing, from enjoying life, from living. But we need to meet that philosophical, basically, requirement of that Seven of Cups. The Seven of Cups is the card of dreams, of illusions, and our inner desires. And we have to acknowledge the fact that everything in life, everything in existence is basically an illusion. Nothing is really set in stone, not even the laws of physics, because yes, absolutely, most of matter functions in a certain way, but then you always have a certain type of black hole, a quasar, or a spatial anomaly which disregards the laws of physics, and then everything that we knew until that point is a big question mark already. So basically, the universe is not set in stone. Every rule can be broken as long as the requirements are being met, as long as that big coincidence take place. So even our human world is basically an illusion, but this is where seeking the truth should not be done with fanaticism, should not be done with obsession, because if everything is an illusion in life, then we don't need to hold the ultimate truth. Neither should we take spiritual principles into extremes, because the divine is alive in absolutely anything, even illusions, even lies, even manipulation, even negative things. So basically, everything that is in existence is the, how should I even say it, the manifestation of the divine. So basically, even the illusions, even those things which hurt us, even those things which repulse us, are still the divine. So basically, this is telling us not to get that fanatical about spiritual principles, because you cannot say that something is aligned with the divine and another thing is just profane and totally low vibe, because it wouldn't exist if the divine wouldn't need it for a specific reason. So basically everything is divine. Yes, the frequency is totally different, but fish live in the ocean, they live in water, but in different layers of it. Some are bottom dwellers, others live much closer to the surface of the water, and this is like a big etc. So everything has its place, everything has its time, and we shouldn't look at it with judgment. And basically, when we learn to do that, then we won't look even at our own illusions with judgment. It is absolutely fine to have fantasies. It is totally normal to have your own personal subjectivity, your own personal, even illogical preferences, everything that is within you. Like, absolutely, it is not aligned to objectivity and to external reality, but that is absolutely fine. The only thing that wouldn't be fine if you use that in a toxic, in a very bad intended way. But even that is questionable because they're predators in nature, so nothing is really new. Why shouldn't there be predators in the human world? Why shouldn't there be sources of conflict, of competition and strife in the human world? Because that promotes lessons, that promotes wisdom, that promotes evolution. And if there are people, beings, souls who wish to take such a role upon themselves, well then absolutely fine, no problem with it. Because no one is not subjected to karma, no one is not subjected to their actions producing ripples, so we can do whatever we wish. It is a free world basically. It is free will, the liber arbiter, so evil illusions have their roles in life, and we shouldn't take any offense to another person's illusion, no matter how illogical and stupid or offensive, even offensive it may be to us, because as long as they're not using it to harm directly, we shouldn't really be perceiving it as an immediate threat. So ultimately, the big picture here, the big divine message is that we should really chill out and just enjoy this present moment state of not knowing, of a certain kind of ignorance, because what they say, ignorance is bliss. And this is a divine gift of bliss, because we may be lost and we may not hold all the answers, but then again, who does in the present moment? No one. We are not alone. We are actually in the same boat, everyone the same way. And some people can choose to turn this into anxiety and panic attacks and driving them crazy, while other people can just choose it to look at the world as subjectively, as fantasy-like as they would desire, because it doesn't really matter anymore. No one holds the truth, and no one knows how the future that all of us are being invited to step into is going to look like. All we know that there is still conflict and strife that we have to face collectively, and we also know that there are going to be answers and clarity coming into the big picture, and also karmic moments which we haven't experienced yet. And this is all that we know, and it is absolutely fine not to know the details. There are some times when prophecy can actually help. There are times when a warning can actually change the future profoundly, but there are other times when things are so very chaotic that prophecy has no real use other than to prepare ourselves emotionally and spiritually for a massive change. And this is exactly the main message of that Four of Cups in the present moment. Our contemplations don't need to prepare us exactly for something that is going to happen, but they're just trying to prepare us to be strong, hopeful, and stand from a place of total self-acceptance and love, because that is what we need to embrace the future and nothing else. Chances are that the future that we are heading towards, the High Priestess reverse, which closes this reading, is so mysterious and it's so, unusual to our basic normality, that all of us are going to be basically apprentices, all of us are going to be inexperienced students one way or another, and we still have to do all that adaptation work to reconfigure everything, to adapt ourselves to our new conditions, maybe the new legislation, new philosophies, new spiritual principles, new legal principles. So all of that is part of the big picture. So why even worry right now when we don't have anything that we need? But we do have emotional empowerment. We do have a lot of inner power. We do have a lot of fantasy and imagination. And that, soul level solitude which disconnects us from all the drama. So we should take this as a blessing. And that Eight of Cups also closes the reading. And that is where this setup is actually a divine present, a divine gift, because imagine the ideal conditions that we have in the present moment, not to care about anything that is going on in the world, because we know that it's not the final version, we know that it is just a transition, we know without a shadow of a doubt that it is just very ephemeral. So that gives us all the opportunity and comfort, emotional comfort, that we could possibly wish for, to just focus on ourselves, to just focus on abandoning everything that is no longer alive inside of us emotionally, because at the end of the day, that is what matters. What is alive in us emotionally, and what is only a skeleton and needs to be buried. And another aspect of this, when everyone is basically in the same boat, well, envy and greed and, over analyzing the situation of another person and comparing ourselves to them is that much illogical to do in the present moment. So for very many people, this is like a breath of emotional and psychological freedom, when they know that comparing ourselves to another person or looking at how other people are doing stuff is so very unnecessary now, because no one is better off than us, really. Everyone is just as frightened, everyone is just as uncertain, and even if they would have all the money in the world, that means absolutely nothing right now, because we know without a shadow of a doubt that it is not just what they tell us what's going on in the world, that this is something that the divine is orchestrating, and the signs are absolutely anywhere. And we don't need to interpret the signs in any way, we just need to see them, and that's all. The signs are basically, that's all they're meant to tell us, that the divine is at work, and we should, acknowledge this and step back, let it do what it needs to do. So this is actually quite an ideal condition, because there is no jealousy, there is no expectations of others, there is nothing to limit us psychologically, because everything that is limiting, it is so very obvious and clear. All you need to do is just turn on your TV and you see the games, you see the manipulation. You're free. You are perfectly able to see this. Yes, it doesn't help you in any way, but it can, be a motivational force to stop yourself from absorbing it, to falling into their tricks, to just turn it off and disconnect and focus on yourself. And this is exactly the hidden blessing in it. So that High Priestess is reversed. It is, everything is under the shroud of mystery, but it's absolutely fine. And this pretty much concludes your daily tarot reading. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your trust. Until next time, bye for now.